A ridge in South Africa, roughly a million years ago. The sky cracks open, lightning slams into a dry patch of grassland, and within seconds the horizon is on fire. Most animals run. Every instinct screams run. But somewhere nearby, a small group of early humans does something no other species on Earth had ever done before. They walk toward it, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why that single decision, walking toward the fire instead of away from it, might be one of the most important choices in our entire evolutionary story. Here's something wild before we even get into the science. Cultures all over the world, completely unconnected to each other, tell some version of the same myth, Prometheus stealing fire from the Greek gods. Trickster figures snatching fire from the sky in indigenous stories across the Americas. Fire gifted, stolen, or smuggled away from some powerful source in myths from Africa to Polynesia. That's not a coincidence you can just shrug off. When practically every culture on the planet independently lands on fire had to be stolen, it's worth asking whether that's mythology remembering something real. Let's clear something up right away because pop culture has completely lied to you about this. That classic image of a caveman furiously rubbing two sticks together to summon fire on command? That's not how it started. Not even close. For an enormous stretch of human history, we couldn't make fire at all. We could only take it, steal it, really, from lightning strikes, from smoldering volcanic vents, from the occasional lucky spark off a wildfire started by something completely outside human control. Early humans weren't fire creators, they were fire opportunists, and the gap between those two things is way bigger and way weirder than most people realize. Here's where the story gets interesting. Archaeological evidence for controlled fire use goes back roughly 1 million years, based on burned bone fragments and ash deposits found deep inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. What makes this site so convincing isn't just that there's ash. It's the location. That ash sits deep inside the cave, far from the entrance, in a spot where wind-blown natural fire really shouldn't be able to reach on its own. Something, or someone, had to carry that fire in there. Other sites push the debate further, and honestly get a lot messier. Joe Kudian in China once produced claims of fire use going back several 100,000 years, tied to famous Homo erectus fossils. Though later reanalysis raised serious doubts about whether that evidence was truly fire, or just naturally discolored sediment doing a very convincing impression of ash. Some researchers argue for even earlier dates at other sites, though those claims get debated fiercely because proving ancient fire was deliberately controlled, rather than just leftover ash from a random natural burn that happened to blow into a cave, is genuinely tricky. Fire doesn't leave a signed confession. It just leaves ash, and ash is annoyingly quiet about who lit it. But here's the twist that should really mess with your mental image of prehistoric life. Controlling fire and creating fire are two completely different skill sets. And for an almost unbelievably long stretch of time, early humans had mastered the first one while remaining totally clueless about the second. Think about what that actually means. You've got a species intelligent enough to recognize fire's value, intelligent enough to carry it, protect it, feed it fuel, and use it to cook food and ward off predators. And yet, if that flame ever went out, that was it. Game over. No backup plan. No emergency spark. Just cold nights and raw meat until maybe another lightning strike or wildfire happened to wander close enough to steal from again. And the predator part matters more than it might sound. Real quick, I just wanted to say, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider subscribing. It only takes a second and it helps the channel out a ton. Anyway, let's get back to it. Early human camps were sitting in landscapes full of large cats, hyenas, and other predators more than capable of turning a sleeping group into an easy meal. A maintained fire wasn't just cozy, it was a nightly security system, the one piece of technology standing between a group and whatever was prowling just beyond the firelight. Lose the flame, and you weren't just facing a cold night. You were facing a considerably more dangerous one too. That's an enormous amount of pressure riding on one flickering flame. So naturally, keeping that flame alive became one of the most important jobs in early human society. Someone, or more likely several someones, had the responsibility of feeding it constantly, shielding it from rain, moving it carefully when the group relocated, and making absolutely sure it never, under any circumstances, went out. We don't have a job title for this from the fossil record, obviously, but anthropologists sometimes half jokingly call this role the firekeeper. And honestly, that job description sounds more stressful than most modern careers. Imagine your entire community's survival depending on you personally never letting a campfire die. No sick days, no days off. Forget an ember, and you might be looking at weeks of freezing nights and dangerously undercooked meals for your entire group. And this is where it gets even stranger. Some researchers believe that maintained fires may have been kept burning continuously for extraordinarily long stretches, potentially generations, passed down and protected specifically because starting from scratch simply wasn't an option yet. That flame wasn't just useful, it was, in a very real sense, irreplaceable. And that flame wasn't just about staying warm either. There's a theory sometimes called the cooking hypothesis, suggesting that reliable access to cooked food may have played a genuine role in fueling the energy demands of a growing human brain. Cooked food is easier to digest, packs more accessible calories, and takes way less chewing effort than raw meat and tough plant fiber. If that theory holds up, then the firekeeper wasn't just preventing cold nights. They were, in a roundabout way, guarding one of the ingredients that helped build the modern human mind. No pressure indeed. Now, here's a question worth sitting with for a second. If losing your only fire meant going back to cold nights and raw food, why didn't early humans just figure out fire making technology sooner? It seems like such an obvious next step, right? Turns out striking sparks on command is a lot harder than it looks, and it took a very specific combination of materials, technique, and honestly luck to crack it. The earliest solid evidence for deliberate fire starting technology, things like friction-based fire drills or percussion methods using pyrite and flint, doesn't show up until dramatically later than that first controlled use of natural fire. We're talking a gap of hundreds of thousands of years between "we know how to keep fire alive" and "we know how to make fire appear out of nothing." Some evidence for these techniques becomes much clearer within roughly the last 100,000 years, with widespread, unambiguous fire-starting kits showing up even more recently than that. Which means, for the overwhelming majority of human history involving fire, we were entirely dependent on borrowing it from nature and then never, ever letting it go out. Let that sink in. Modern humans, fully capable of complex tool use, symbolic thought, and long-distance migration, spent an absolutely enormous chunk of that time still fundamentally hostage to lightning strikes for their fire supply. And this dependency shaped behavior in ways that are honestly kind of fascinating. Groups likely had to stay within reach of reliable fire sources, or carry embers with them on the move, tucked into some kind of smoldering container, nursed along like the world's highest stakes campfire relay race. Migration into new, unfamiliar territory probably came with an unspoken calculation. What happens if our fire dies out here, somewhere completely new, before we find another natural source to steal from? Here's a fun way to think about it. Every single time your ancient ancestors moved into a new region, they were essentially gambling that either their carried ember would survive the trip, or that lightning would eventually do them a favor. No pressure. That carrying process alone deserves way more credit than it usually gets. We're talking about slow-burning materials like fungus, dried moss, or smoldering wood packed carefully to burn low and steady rather than flare up and die out fast. Someone had to monitor it constantly on the move, feeding it just enough air and fuel to survive a journey that could stretch for days, all while carrying food, tools, and children, and probably keeping an eye out for whatever large predator hadn't gotten the memo about respecting fire yet. It's less casually carrying a torch and more high-stakes mobile life support system, except the patient is a flame. And if it dies, everyone suffers the consequences together. Now, once fire-starting technology finally did arrive, it wasn't some overnight revolution either. Early methods were slow, inconsistent, and physically exhausting. Friction-based fire starting, using something like a wooden drill spun rapidly against a base to generate enough heat for an ember, takes real technique, patience, and honestly a decent amount of upper body stamina. Anyone who's tried it in a modern survival class knows it's nowhere near as easy as movies make it look. You don't just rub two sticks together for 30 seconds and get a roaring blaze. You get sore arms, maybe a thin wisp of smoke if you're lucky, and a newfound respect for anyone who managed to pull this off without a lighter waiting in their back pocket as a backup. Percussion methods weren't exactly a walk in the park either. Striking pyrite against flint to throw off a hot enough spark requires the right materials, the right angle, and honestly, the right amount of stubbornness, since your first 50 attempts are extremely likely to produce nothing but frustration and slightly bruised knuckles. It's the kind of skill that probably got passed down carefully from person to person, not because it was secret, but because getting it wrong repeatedly was such a miserable, time-consuming process that nobody wanted to relearn it from scratch every single generation. But once humans cracked reliable fire-starting methods, everything changed, and changed fast. Suddenly, that ancient dependency on lightning strikes and lucky wildfires became optional rather than essential. Groups could venture into colder climates without worrying quite so much about losing their only heat source permanently. Cooking became far more consistent and predictable rather than dependent on whatever flame happened to still be alive that week. And, symbolically, fire-making shifted from something borrowed from nature's unpredictable temper into something humans genuinely owned, start to finish, for the very first time. There's something almost poetic about that shift, honestly. For most of our species' relationship with fire, we were essentially tenants, borrowing something powerful and dangerous from a landlord who could take it back any time. No notice given. Fire-starting technology turned us into owners, and that transition alone probably reshaped how confidently humans expanded into new environments, because suddenly, the terrifying question of what if the fire dies here had an actual answer, beyond hope for the best. There's another layer to this worth mentioning before we wrap up. That flame wasn't only functional. Some researchers argue that gathering around a stable, reliable fire in the evenings gave early humans something genuinely new. Extended time in the dark, awake, together, with nothing urgent left to do but talk. Daylight hours were for survival tasks. Firelight hours, once fire became dependable enough to sit around instead of anxiously tend, may have become some of the first real space for storytelling, social bonding, and the kind of shared culture that doesn't fossilize but absolutely shaped who we became. It's a strange thought that the campfire chat, humanity's oldest form of entertainment, might trace its roots directly back to a borrowed spark nobody was originally sure they'd get to keep. Here's the twist that really reframes this whole story, though. That original relationship with fire, the desperate, dependent, borrowed version, likely lasted for the vast majority of the time humans have used fire at all. The image of humanity fully in control of fire, striking it up whenever needed, is actually the recent chapter. The much longer, much stranger chapter is the one where we were essentially fire's guests, watching the sky nervously, hoping for a storm, and honestly, when you frame it that way, that opening scene makes a lot more sense. Early humans weren't being reckless walking toward a lightning-sparked wildfire. They were doing the single most calculated, high-value thing available to them. That fire wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity with a ticking clock, and grabbing it carefully, cautiously, and probably terrifyingly might have been one of the smartest survival decisions our ancestors ever made. So next time you flick a lighter without a second thought or casually strike a match to light a candle, take a moment to appreciate just how insanely long it took our species to earn that convenience. For the overwhelming majority of our history with fire, that simple click would have seemed like actual magic, a power reserved exclusively for storms, volcanoes, and whatever lucky spark nature decided to hand over that day. If this blew your mind even a little, drop a single word in the comments, spark. I want to know if you'd have survived as a firekeeper or if humanity would have frozen back into the dark waiting on you specifically to keep watch. And if stories like this, where the real history turns out to be stranger and slower than the version we all grew up believing, are your thing, there's plenty more buried in the prehistoric record just waiting to be dug up. Because it turns out some of the most powerful tools in human history didn't start as inventions at all. They started as things we simply learned to hold on to tightly, desperately, for as long as we possibly could, until eventually we didn't need to steal them anymore.